Well.
Yeah,
That's a rad song, by the way. I love that
that
song.
was that's a really good song.
That's a
Very
song
good.
by our guest tonight.
Mhm.
Who I'm
Even
not
even
gonna say who it is.
even
I'm
well,
not gonna say who it is.
Frank was bopping to it too. Did you see that
I
earlier?
did see that. As a matter of fact, can I
He
see
was
that again, please?
he was bopping.
Yeah.
That's how Frank would dance
Are you
to.
sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
He would raise the roof?
He would raise well, look what he says. He's already raised the roof. It's
No,
just a matter.
that's a casual man.
Well, yeah, but that's for raise the roof for back then, right? That was the '60s raise the roof. They hadn't quite raised it yet. It was kind of the roof is like there,
Because there
and
were people were shorter back then.
the roof got higher because the roof was on fire.
I hear you. They raised the roof due to architectural choices.
They raised the roof.
Humans were getting taller
because of time.
and also potential fire hazards. I hear you.
Yes, yeah. Well, like everything with technology, it gets better, right? Things get higher, right? They
True.
get
Yeah.
faster. So
Yep.
then the roof, as they say,
Yes.
got higher.
The roof.
So
The roof is on fire.
or the roof got higher.
Yep. And that was Frank. Frank who?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Nobody knows Frank anymore.
Yeah. We were talking
It's like-
ahead of time. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were saying about Buddy Rich,
Yeah. No. Who's Buddy Rich?
right?
I haven't been to his TikTok channel.
No,
I don't see Buddy Rich doing any type of dance craze to the newest Mariana's Trench song.
Have you ever seen Buddy Rich do an Instagram cover? No.
No.
Or a TikTok cover?
Not at all. Yeah. He's very irrelevant.
Oh,
That's
the
true.
hate mail that's going to be coming in.
Yeah. We love Buddy.
We do love Buddy.
Yeah. But
And
but it does bring up the conversation that we were having pre-stream specifically
Yes.
about let me put this up, by the way, just so people don't recognize that we're just two buffoons sitting here chatting.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, if you're in chat, say hello. We would love to have you we'd love to have you say hello. That way we know that we're not just here alone. But we were talking about specifically TikTok, social media drummers, I guess, in particular.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's certainly a growing thing. And it was really, really interesting for you to look up who is the biggest YouTube artist, like who's got the most subscribers. And I was like, easily Buddy Rich for obvious reasons.
No.
There's Echo Drop. Hey, Echo Drop. Oh, welcome, Echo Drop. Oh, hey, everyone. That's what I wrote.
Nice.
But it was not Buddy Rich. Who was it?
Oh God, no.
It was somebody else.
I can't remember his name. It's Cooper something. But
Good old Coops.
I looked up Travis Barker. I looked up Dave Grohl,
Yeah.
Tommy Lee, Ringo Starr.
Yeah. And let's be real, guys
Not
like
at the top.
guys like David Grohl, that's what I call him. David Grohl.
Grohl?
Yeah, David Grohl.
I think he likes Dave though.
Nope.
He's a Dave.
Whatever it says on his driver's license is what I refer to people as. So David Grohl.
What if his name's Alan?
Oh, Alan Grohl.
Well, there
Yeah,
you
that's
go.
fine.
Okay.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah, he's usually just posting like show clips that really you can watch the entire show on YouTube anyways.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like people wanting to learn stuff, people wanting to see 30 seconds of somebody drumming a really cool lick to like Porcupine Tree or just, something in particular, those are the things that get the most clicks and move up through the algorithm, and people get the old TikTok famous because of 30 seconds of fun. And it's really cool to see so many really good drummers become viral due to like a minute's worth of content that they just keep doing different minutes of content. It's very good. I like it.
Yeah, so I wonder. So then that begs the
Buddy
question,
couldn't have done that.
Like,
There's no way
like
Buddy
what
could.
if Buddy and Frank were still around? Would that have, would they have done those 30-second clips of like, that's life,
That would
and
be great.
that would have been it?
I think Buddy's clip would have been, "Get the fuck off my bus."
I still say we should have Liberty back
Yeah.
and just get his commentary on each TikTok drummer we show him,
Absolutely.
because Liberty's like the angry old guy.
those who don't know, Liberty DeVito's drummer for Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Was drummer for Billy Joel,
Yeah.
and yeah, it would be. You're right. It would be very interesting to see
because
him
he's just
going
very
through
honest,
stuff.
and he's just
Yeah.
very musical, and he's got, I mean, his depth of knowledge and his technique is just amazing. But he
Yes.
has no time for new
For
technology and new
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
I've heard I think it would be really funny to just say, Lib, so let's go through all the current TikTok drummers and let's just get your opinion.
I think he would just go garbage next, garbage next. Well, I tend to think maybe he would be uber surprised though. He would probably go, "Oh wow, that's amazing."
And that's what I think. I think he would be pleasantly surprised that the new generation, as it were,
Yes,
is repping the drums quite hard. Like that,
Very
there's
true.
a lot of stuff that's happening that I think, especially if you limit your sort of tastes and you limit your accessibility, then you don't see some of the awesome stuff that's happening. In fact, a really good interview I saw was Abe Laboriel Jr. And I don't know if chat viewers know who that is, but Abe is the drummer for Paul McCartney, incidentally, who's
he was in the Beatles.
Yeah, Paul was in the Beatles, not Abe. Abe was too young to be in the Beatles, but he is, and he's also a really busy session musician. In fact, the story goes that Abe was so busy one time, this producer, there was like a final crash, and the producer was just kind of like just fading down the ambience of the cymbal swell, and he saw Abe walk by the control room. That's how busy he was. He had to fucking get up and start he was on to the next. He was on to his next appointment. He said,
"See you, folks.
We weren't even done." And he's walking by the control room. "See you later."
Yeah. No, I just imagine him like walking by and like literally unbeeping his car at the same time. Beep, beep, and bye.
Yeah. So, but
they'll have sticks for me.
And so the interview goes that he said, "As I'm as good a programmer as I am a drummer." And so, and that's what he's been working on. He studied with Terry Bozzio, and his dad, of course, is Abe Laboriel Sr., who's a very, very successful and famous bass
player. Yeah.
And Abe said, I just never, and he's not like, Abe's not a young guy. And he when the Pro Tools first came out, and then when Ableton Live first came out, Abe said, "I was on it. I got on it. I started learning. I started figuring it out. I started learning how to do MIDI. I started learning how to program MIDI." And he said, like, that's the top call guys and girls in LA. They know how to do both. They can do both and he said, and they can sort of, I forget who it was.
It feels like it's required now.
Oh,
by the way, good to see you, Joel. Welcome to the stream. I love it.
It has to be. It has to. You have to have all the tools of the toolbox. Even like our mutual friend Thomas Lang, same thing. Thomas is as good a programmer as he is a drummer. Like he understands the.
We've while I was at Roland, we had lots of conversations about being a relevant drummer. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll ask our guest tonight about this as well, is there's maybe a little even a crossfade that happens where you start learning the technology so much so. And let me clarify, I'm certainly, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, if you know what I mean, like working for that company, but I will say I genuinely enjoyed playing electronic drums. For a multitude of reasons. And if I had an electronic kit and an acoustic kit sitting directly in front of me, I tended to gravitate towards the electronic kit, not just because I worked, but because I genuinely enjoyed it more. And it got me certainly programming more, getting into drum and bass, getting into EDM, like playing all those styles on the electronic kit. And I just wonder, the same deal with our guest tonight. I wonder if there was a crossfade that happens where you're a drummer. You get into like programming, you start learning it, and then you start realizing there's other avenues of the electronic world that is open to you, and then you're almost like, I like that.
Exactly.
I'm going that route,
exactly.
Right?
It opens you up. I was an acoustic drummer for I don't know how many years, until 2016-ish, and my wife and I, as a duo, got a gig on a cruise ship, and I was going to just run tracks, and then as it turned out, I figured out I could through this. You were working at Roland at this time,
Yeah.
that I could use the SPDSX
Right.
as a means of playing notes, kind of like a xylophone, and that just turned into something which, even, I mean, that got us to like the biggest, the nicest hotel in Changsha, China for 6 months at the nicest club. And I mean, that 2 years of playing bass and drums at the same time for me, I mean, I've studied with some bad motherfuckers, and those lessons, learning how to do that, and learning about electronics, learning about how to program some of that stuff was like, I wish, I mean, I don't know how much you'd have to pay to have those lessons, because, but then also stuff now that I know I can do just simply because I learned how to do that.
Correct.
You
It
know
opened
what
up
I
a
mean?
whole
Like,
other world. Right?
I saw things from a whole different perspective. I mean, and case in point, like I was saying before stream, my wife and I, we started recording our album right before COVID hit and had a baby. And we kept going with the album. And I can't play drums in the 500 square feet I have, acoustic drums anyway.
Yes.
So we did it. We used electronically. We did it all electronically. And I fucking basically did the whole album. There's your answer.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's
I basically did the whole album on an electric kit. And the parts that I wanted to be acoustic, I can just use VSTs.
Right.
To be on, right?
It's gotten so good.
It's just, and even now, if I were to go in and I'm not discounting acoustics, trust me, I love the sound of my acoustic
we would
kit.
alienate 90% of our crowd right here.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to get my hands on like a Craviato or a Noble and Cooley kit. True. That said, if I walked into a studio to record another album, I would make sure I had triggers on that kit, because I want to be able to manipulate those sounds later.
Yeah, it's really interesting how I've worked with some producers that have had me record just the shells with electronic cymbals, and then do the same thing reverse, where I use electronic pads and acoustic cymbals, just to have the isolation of everything. But that is the absolute next level, is
absolutely,
or the same level, I guess, to be the end. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we bring in our guest? I will tell you this right before we do that. Just a very, very quick story. The last stream we did on Saturday night with Nate Morton.
Saturday. Yep.
Yeah, Nate Morton was great. Nate Morton's a hybrid drummer as well, from The Voice, house drummer from The Voice, and In Excess Supernova. I had coffee, like I had a full coffee that I let get cold, so I refilled it with a totally new coffee. So I had two coffees, and I drank all that while we were doing the stream. So Saturday night, I had the worst sleep I've ever had. I was a wreck.
I can only imagine.
I was a wreck.
I wasn't drinking coffee, but I can only imagine.
No, exactly. I was an absolute wreck. And I have a sleeping disorder. Like, I've got sleep apnea, so I can fall asleep no problem at all. But that was the problem. My body was fighting going to sleep, and my brain was like, no. Like, everything was super.
You should have just called me.
I should have. It was like 4 a.m, though, and I came out to the living room and just lay on the couch and was on like TikTok, whatever, just trying to rest my mind.
I actually drank so much coffee one time, my epiglottis, that's the thing at the back of your throat. Wow. It turned sideways on me, and I drank so much coffee.
That's defiant of it. What are you talking about?
And I thought I was choking. I literally thought I was choking. And I got to where I was on the road, and we were on tour, and I literally drove myself to the hospital in the middle of the night because the guys were like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I can't breathe. I'm choking." So I went into the emergency room, and the doctor's like looking at me. He goes, "What have you been doing?" And I was like, "Nothing. I've been driving for like 16 hours." And he goes, "Have you been taking any drugs?" Or blah, blah, blah. I was like, No,
I'm a musician. I don't do drugs.
Never done that. Well, I've been drinking coffee. And he goes, "Oh, that's what it is." My epiglottis reacted to all the caffeine. And when I looked at it,
it tried to escape. Is that what you're getting at?
He showed me a picture of it. It was like, if it hangs like this, it was like pointing sideways. And he said, your epiglottis shouldn't do that. That's why you were choking. It was like trying to go down my throat.
Well, if there's anything people have learned tonight is to take care of your epiglottis.
Yes. Not too much
perfect.
coffee.
Not too much coffee. Well, maybe that was my issue on Saturday night. I had an epiglottis night.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely my epiglottis was pointing towards the living room and going, you should probably be on TikTok for a bit.
Yeah, you should probably be. You should have streamed, man. You should have streamed on Twitch.
You're right.
Yeah,
I'll be able to do that in my new place that I'm moving to.
Good.
So I wanted to bring that up because coffee destroyed me. So tonight I'm drinking something much more healthier. I've got some gin. Can't go wrong with that.
There you go. That's way better.
It's absolutely healthy for you, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
It won't do anything to my epiglottis, I hope.
We'll see.
We will see. But I want to bring in my guest tonight, or our guest, sorry. He is an electronic musician, composer, collaborist. He works with so many people. Tonight he's going to be an educator, DJ, and he is also a specialist, I just learned recently, in lemon water. Can I learn a little bit about that there, Goat?
Anytime you want. Anytime.
Yeah, what's going on? What's going on with this lemon water situation?
It's it's just one of those things that I have a very deep passion for, and
for lemon water,
it's gonna sweep the nation. It's gonna sweep the nation. Just watch.
What do you mean? Like nobody was drinking lemon water before this, and you suddenly unlocked something?
Well, when no, actually, I was talking to my wife about it. I drink a lot of lemon water at home, and my wife recently brought up where about 8 or so years ago, she's like, "Do you realize that you were influencing before influencers?" And we just kind of got in the chat about that, and I was like,
Tell more.
Sure. And I was doing this ongoing joke about my passion for lemon water. This was years and years and years ago. Yes. Anyway, decided to kick it back up again because social media was getting a little boring, and apparently people really liked those posts. So
it certainly got my attention.
Talk about things that don't matter to anybody will get the most traction. Trust me.
Is that the secret? It isn't.
That's
something
the secret right there. Yeah.
Yeah. It isn't something until it's something. Like that, we've determined that within doing all the streams that we've been doing here on Drum Geek is that we love geeking out on drums, but we also love geeking out on like lemon water and knowing how are people
and epiglottis.
Epiglottis. I think you'll appreciate that we can certainly talk about synths and DJing and drumming and what we're doing today, but really, how do we get through each day? Like, is it lemon water that just keeps you feeling good and keeps you mentally motivated to write? Does it? Right. Yeah.
Well, it's that. It's a lot of espresso. You just have to. That's all it is, really. A pitch black room, and some espresso, and every morning this is my big preaching moment is getting in the studio every morning at 5 a.m. and just whatever you have to do to get an hour in, even if it's 10 minutes of work, just get it in every day. That's I've been telling people that for years, and you will see your productivity shift, and you will increase and write more music, complete more songs, do all the things that everybody wants to do. So
I've noticed that you went live a whole bunch of times, and when I woke up in the morning, it was like the Goat went live 3 hours ago, and that was like 5 a.m. Yes, you were going live on Instagram. I don't know if you're still doing that. I feel like you did it a few times, but you're I thought that was really good, and it illustrates, I now understand kind of what your path was doing that. And if I'm being very honest, that inspired me, and I even mentioned it to my wife, that we're in the midst of moving to Kelowna, and you heard me mention that I've got sleep apnea. I don't need that many hours of sleep per night. I don't need the classic 8 hours. So I really want to wake up early every day, like the 5 o'clock, and try to get so much more out of my day. And how do you feel? Has that been working for you? Is that something you've done kind of for such a long time that it's just a staple?
It is, yeah. It's literally it kind of came out of necessity, really. When we had our kids, I've got twins.
Whoa, yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I could still continue to write music in that hectic time when they were first born, right? So
Right.
what I found at the time that least got in the way of our family duties was waking up that bit early, going to the studio, getting some work done, and then I had the rest of the day to do whatever I needed to do. Um, and then in the evenings I was tired anyway, and I didn't want to stay up and work on music, and that's actually something I've struggled with when I do have things that I need to do the next day. If I work on music in the evening, my brain just keeps racing and racing and racing, and I conjure up all these ideas, and I should have tweaked that, I should have done this, I should go back and take a look at that, and I have a hard time sleeping that way. But if I wake up and I get going, and I have I've already made my espressos, and I put them in the fridge, so it's literally cold shots in the morning and in the studio.
Great idea. Cold shots in the morning, prep from the night before. No. I'm so glad you said all that, because my wife is a writer, and she got some good advice from another writer during a panel that we went to about how you this person in particular really enjoyed going to bed with problems that he knows he's got to solve. Mm-hmm. And then the next morning he has an agenda, like he attacks them right away, so that you feel like you're really accomplishing things and coming up, throughout the day, you're now addressing more problems that need to be occurred, that you can hit fresh-minded right in the morning, as opposed to kind of waking up with no real inspiration, or just like, okay, I completed everything yesterday. Now what do I do, right?
I feel
and
like
does that resonate with you a tiny bit?
A lot of 100%. I literally will leave the notes app up on my screen with things that I haven't completed, or ideas that I'm looking to, explore, whatever the case is, so that when I do come in at 5 or 10 after 5, and I'm, out of the shower, I'm caffeinated, I see that list of things that I, wanted to try, and boom, it's right there. And then, you can extrapolate from there and go on your sonic journey, or whatever you want to call it. But at least you can get that little bit of work done to tie up those loose ends and feel like you accomplished things, right? So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it always feels like throughout the day you start losing speed and start losing energy and losing focus. So by the 10 o'clock, or if you've only got a small window of time because you've got kids, and Sean, I point this way because Sean's that way. Sean's got kid and soon to be kids as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that Sean has the witching hours that he's working within as well. You want to be productive, but you also want to walk away from it going, holy cow, I got some shit done. It felt good. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, and I think too, like it's just a question of like prioritizing things too, right? Like there's things I have to get done, there's things I want to get done, and then there's things like I need to get done. And just, I don't know, I found myself, especially, probably you can relate, Goat, when you have kids, you kind of really learn to prioritize your life a lot faster.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. And one of the greatest moments of my morning is when they wake up, they come in here, and they come in here every morning, and they want to make noise, and they want to they want to see the lights on the modular, and they do all that stuff. And that's just like, they're creating memories, whatever those memories are, they're creating them, and that in itself is pretty cool and enriching too. So
yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely.
Last thing you'd want is for them to come in the studio and you got some garbage music on that you're not happy about, and then they're judging you nonstop, right?
I'll wait a couple of years for that.
Yeah, that's exactly. How old are they? How old are your kids?
They're five.
They're five. Yeah, they're right at the age where they can walk in and go, ugh, that's not groovy at all. I'm not feeling it, Dad.
You know what I will say, their taste in music is actually forming. They both really liked that most recent Halsey album, the one that Trent Reznor produced. Yeah, they both really like that. I've had live footage of like the Deftones on, and they've really appreciated that. My daughter likes Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, which is pretty cool. So
I don't know Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Is that a kid
wonderful thing? She's very eccentric. You should check out the Yeah Yeah Yeahs.
I should check out. Yeah.
I know. Have your kids?
Why do I feel left out? Sorry.
Have your kids? Do the kids play with the gear there? Go.
Yeah. I have. It's the Behringer version of the Roland SH-101, the MS-1, and I'm writing with it right now. And that, for whatever reason, that's the one they gravitate towards, and I think because it's very simple, and just the tactile nature of how it's laid out, it's they get instant gratification out of the small tools, right? So and the fact that it has a keyboard to it, I have a some more like my small system here and a Behringer TB303. Sorry, I'm doing Behringer stuff here.
It's all good. I don't know if you know. I don't work for Roland anymore, so you don't need to appease anybody. It makes no difference to me. It's totally fine.
You can say Alesis, Yamaha. We don't care.
Back when I worked there, anytime I'd go to a groundwork meetup or something, and people would be like, "Oh, sorry, I've got this Yamaha or whatever." I'm like, whatever, that's fine. Music is music. Whatever you got to use, go for it. Yeah.
Behringer in some schools of thought did Roland dirty by doing these very cheap knockoffs, but in the same rate, feel like they did a lot of but I feel like they did a lot of people justice, because I sure as hell would not be able to spend the thousands of dollars for a TB303. You know what I mean?
I think you're realistic. Right. I equate it to I say this every stream. I'm a Subaru owner. And you can either own a Dodge Viper or you can own like super nice sports cars and that type of thing. But Subaru came out with something interesting called the BRZ series, which is basically the Impreza with just a really nice body on it. Like, it looks really sleek. It kind of looks like a Ferrari. It looks cool. But when you look under the hood, it's just an Impreza. There's nothing special about it. But there is a sense of pride that you get by owning certain things, regardless of what's kind of under the hood. And then on the flip side of it, you just kind of want to just trust what's under the hood, and you don't really care what it looks like. And I think that applies to musical instruments. Is that sometimes you just need to have a good piece of gear that's reliable, that has the sounds you're looking for, regardless of the company, regardless of whatever the hell people have talked about it. It's a piece of gear you like, and that's going to be my piece of gear, versus something that's got a lot of lights and modular and you got kind of everything that you're only going to use 1% of, Yeah,
100%. And there's so many different ways to obtain that gear now as well, via either the original companies producing them, or VSTs, or the knockoff brands doing knockoff versions. So and some of those cloud-based or VST instruments sound incredible. They're absolutely incredible. But I have always enjoyed the tactile, the feel of changing the property of, like, right before your eyes. It's happening. Right? So
do you feel like that's kind of been and I can only speak on behalf of when I was at Roland. There was this big push, this big celebration, I'll use the word, of tactile holding gear suddenly. That when the releases of the new synths, when the TR8 came out, when the TB3 came out, it was really a celebration of getting your hands on gear again. Do you feel that? And kind of on, not the flip side, but kind of a sideways way to it, when you're DJing, there's certainly in the box Serato DJing, which is kind of the go-to, but is there still a celebration of using real vinyl? Is there a celebration of using real CDs still these days? Or no?
I definitely think that there is, with the vinyl end of things. You can market a night that's a vinyl only night, but to market a night that is CDs only doesn't really have any weight to it. You know what I mean? Because everyone's going to just be plugging USBs in, syncing up the CDJs, and off they go.
Yeah.
Myself included, right? There's an ease of use there. Also, too, with working in a club environment, playing turntables can have issues with bass bins, right? So, like, you can have the physical nature of the turntable can have problems, and that's where the reliability of something like the CDJs and bringing a USB in is kind of the way to. Well, I'm not going to say kind of the way, but it is a way to go about doing it, right? So
it's a factor. It's an absolute factor.
Yeah.
I think there's enough
100%,
space and time between vinyl and digital now that vinyl can be its own thing, whereas CD, it's still like, that was not too long ago, and there's a lot of clunkiness to it, like you said.
True.
So, like, if the club we were at in China, like Tommy the DJ, he couldn't spin any CDs because he was sitting right on top of one of the bass bins, and there's no way, like, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen.
And I think DJs approach the medium different too. Like, if you're playing a vinyl set, there's a little bit more finesse, and you need to be a little more patient, and your track selection needs to be that much more researched. With CDJs and that kind of a thing, it's I've played full 3-hour sets at Gorgamish in Vancouver, where I maybe I knew the broad strokes of about 60% of the songs, but I didn't know them. I was first trying them live, to me, to me, that's really exciting though, because it's scary, because it's like, what's going to happen next? I hope this turns out, I'm not sure I've admitted that to a lot of people. I know if Joel's still on the feed, I know he knows that, because him and I have played back to back there, and I played back to back a number of times. And even with that aspect, it's, if him and I were playing together, I don't know what songs he's bringing. He doesn't know what I'm bringing. We have a general understanding of, okay, we're the last slot on the show. This person's going to be before us. They're probably going to take it up to this level of intensity or color. Let's just plan to be more than that. And then I don't know what he's going to bring. He doesn't know what I'm going to bring. And that's the excitement right there. That to me is the punk rock of it happening right there.
The discovery.
Yeah. Do you feel like that might be lost upon within the audience, or does it matter, I guess, that you're sweating, or not sweating, but you're like really reading the crowd and going, this is what I'm going to go into. This is what it feels like, and really DJing the night. Versus what the illusion is, and I hope you don't take any disrespect from this, what the illusion to a lot of the audience is that you're just pressing play on iTunes and then you just get to drink all night long. I know certainly that's zero the case, but to the layman,
but it can be the case.
They may actually. Oh, that's very true. Actually,
let's just be honest.
Super to that. Yes, correct. Yeah, but I guess it's kind of lost upon within the audience. But I'm supposing that by the end, you must feel a great sense of pride when you're done your set and you sit down and go, wow, that was unexpected.
For me, that's the excitement of it, is, if I, sure, I'm selecting tracks and I'm organizing them in some way. And like, for a while, I would organize them by hour of the night, and it would be a whole, variety of tracks that I feel like would have been good in that time of the night, or what I felt that time of the night, the tempo and bounce and aggression and all that stuff should be right. But if I feel like, and this is going to come up to everybody's approach is going to be different. Sure. For me, I like not knowing the end result. I like to be surprised by what's happening. I like to have the audience know that I'm having the best time ever right now, because when they see that, the reciprocation can instantly happen. They can see that I'm going for it. They can see that I'm loving my moment right now, and in that, it's easier for them to cross that plane and enjoy themselves in that moment too. So I feel like that's important. I honestly, like, my background comes from playing in punk bands. So the you know, having that level of what's going to happen next is very exciting to me. That's I get off on that musically at shows. That's what I want to see. The little, I don't know if you want to call them the little mistakes or the little errors, the human imperfections that can happen at a live show. That's what makes it exciting. It doesn't sound like the album when the band's playing live. It's this new interpretation. It's this unexpected energy shift. That's to me, that's what does it for me. So I try to convey that when I perform and when I DJ.
Happy accidents, the old Bob Ross approach. Yeah. Well, I'm really I'm resonating with all that heavily because I certainly play a lot of improvisational music, and we've talked about it on stream. And improvisational within a ensemble of people, you don't know how it's going to begin, let alone end, at all. And your apprehensions, your fears, your tiredness, everything about it is conveyed in the playing of your instrument within the ensemble. And by the end, it's kind of difficult for you to walk away going, I don't think that went well, because it happened the way it happened, right? So, anyways, I kind of wanted to segue back to what you said before about punk rock drumming. Tell me a bit about, because we're talking a lot about DJ stuff, which I'm loving. But tell us a bit about your roots. What was Little Goat like? What was the kid? Oh my goodness, that's what you call a goat, by the way.
The kid.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Quick aside. Actually, sorry, quick aside.
Yeah.
I had a buddy. He might be watching. Mike McCalco. Mike McCalco, great drummer, by the way. He used to come in the music store that I worked at, and he said to me, "Do you want to see a picture of my kids?" And I'm like, "Sure, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see a picture of your kids." And he opened up his wallet and pulled out photos of goats. And it was the worst dad joke, bad dad joke. But it became a thing. Every time I'd see him, I'm like, "How's the kids?" Even to today, like I see him at drum festivals, and I'm like, "Hey, how's the kids?" And we both kind of, "This is a stupid joke. 20 years old." Anyways, what was the little kid like growing up as a musician?
You know, from a drum perspective, I would honestly tell you, like, 90% self-taught. Not like, I didn't grow up learning rudiments and playing snare drum first and doing those things first. I got into that a little bit more in high school. I actually played trumpet growing up, and it was it happened by chance that when I was, I want to say it was grade 10 or 11, the drummer in our school band didn't want to play drums anymore. And so I asked the teacher, I was like, "Look, every day before class, I would jump behind the kit and, just bang away and have a good old time." And, so he knew that I was playing somewhat. And I was like, "Look, can I play drums instead of playing trumpet?" And he was like, "Well, okay, if you want to," and this was so grade 11, so I'm not talking very challenging stuff here. But right. He was like, "Okay, if it will make a deal that if you can get at least 90% on all the playing tests, you can continue. But if you can't, we'll put you back on trumpet." And I was like, "Oh my goodness. Cool, I love a challenge."
The trumpet's a demotion. So, yikes.
It was a demote second trumpet. What the hell?
I feel you.
No, so I ended up playing drums that year and the next year, and it was a good challenge to have that and to kind of be able to do that. But I'll be honest with you, I had this perspective about playing drums that now, as I'm older, I have a bit of a shift where, when I was maybe 19, 20, and I was, listening to bands like The Locust and listening to At the Drive-In and stuff like that, I was like, I don't need to play rudiments. I don't need to know these things. I want to emote. I want to play loud. I want to play fast. I could play fast, single bass drum things, basic punk rock drumming, but very quickly. And I was proud of that. So I was like, this is my one trick pony move. I'm cool with this. But now kind of looking back on it, and especially seeing the tutorials online, and I follow Drumeo on Instagram. And like it's making me want to get a practice pad again and start actually relearning those old, like those things that I maybe should have learned 20 years ago and spent the time on learning, but I just never thought they were worth their weight for my musical journey.
Right.
And then
I don't think we need to apologize for those things these days at all. You know what I mean?
No.
What got us onto the journey? Yeah.
Well, and what got me on the journey was, I liked electronic music and I liked punk music. So bands like 9 Inch Nails and Ministry and, those kind of bands, that was what I wanted. That's to me what drumming was. So like Chris Vrenna is probably one of my favorite drummers, and he's so awesome. And, that kind of Gabe Serbian from The Locust is actually a super talented drummer. But when you listen to the music, well, you can hear his drumming chops when those songs are playing. But when you hear the music, it's so visceral, and the songs are 25 seconds long and just like it's all out assault. But you can't play like that if you don't have the control and the chops and that ability there. So I think it's kind of a cool thing. I don't know how playing drums on the album was something I wanted to do. My album that I'm putting out later this year, which started as a techno album, and PJ, I think you've heard a number of tracks from it now. It kind of
I think so
covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to harken back to things that I was doing when I first started writing electronic music. And one of those things was I was playing drums. So I wanted to incorporate live drumming into some of the songs, which I was really happy that I got the opportunity to do. So
the full journey is interesting that you mentioned Chris Vrenna. I was touring with an electronic artist, and we had the opportunity on that tour to open for Chris Vrenna, who coincidentally was DJing the night. He was DJing while we were, as a band, playing, and I did feel that sense of reverence, kind of like. I always wonder if bands, when they play like the Tonight Show or when they're playing Saturday Night Live, if they're like eyeballing the house band drummers and they're like, oh, that guy's judging me hard. I know. I don't know how to play this drum kit at all, but I know that it's what they do for a living. So I kind of had that vibe the whole night. I'm like, oh, is Chris around? I don't know. But he said great set, and we did a good job, and I didn't feel like I was judged hard. But he was an example of a drummer DJ turned, but really he's multi-instrumentalist, he's much like yourself, right?
Full composer now. Yeah, he's full composing for video games and film and things like that. Right. And it's pretty cool to see.
That's the full.
But it also creates an incredible mix of, say, like for example, I've always found that when drummers take this step aside into the electronic realm, like I was never really, as a kid, I maybe one album, but then sort of fell out of love with the whole like Motley Crue Shout at the Devil thing. But then when Tommy Lee came around with Methods of Mayhem, and then I was like, there was something kind of, that's good. Like, I don't know the rapping and all, but it's just even the soundscapes, and I was shocked when I heard it was Tommy Lee had teamed up and he was actually getting into, DJing and stuff like that. And I was just like, really? Wow. Okay. And it was something I could definitely get on board with, but ask me to listen to a whole night of Motley Crue, and I'm probably not interested.
Right? No, that's a really good point.
What's interesting, I think he ended up, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think he teamed up with one or both members from the Crystal Method for some of that work. Methods of Mayhem.
There we go. Yeah.
So there's like a crossover, and those guys used to sample funk breaks and They have a very like acid breaks, very distinct sound. So it came off like he definitely added the power element to that in his project, which I'm not sure I listened to that record fully, but I was aware of it, and I do remember hearing it on the radio and being like, "Wow, that is very different for Tommy Lee. Like quite a departure from what we all know him doing."
Yeah. And I always just thought of him as like, you know what, like, because I find, and like you were saying, Paul, like nobody knows who Buddy Rich is and blah blah blah, and it's all good to pay respect to your to your idols and stuff, but at the same time, there's a level of this kind of like traditional where we can't do things this way, well, why? Well, because, and I'm just like, it's when I see an artist breaking that mold, or an artist that crosses over into something, and you just like, you can't, I have nothing but respect for that. It's like, cool, you're stepping outside of the form, that you, I guess, were famous for, but but you're now like, as a DJ or whatever he was doing at the time. Yes, he's Tommy Lee, but I dare say that age group kind of didn't have a clue really who he was, because
whole other realm.
Now you're starting at like zero again, right? Like different. I kind of not a good analogy, but I mean, David Lee Roth becoming a paramedic. It's just like, why?
True.
He's like, because I just wanted to try it. Like, I just love the idea of that. And it's just like, to me, that's what makes such a great artist, is you don't have to label yourself a Dave Weckl just because you can play like him. But if you can also do this thing where you're just pushing two buttons, does that make you less of an artist? No, it doesn't. It doesn't make you less of an artist. It just, go ahead. Sorry, go.
I think going back to what you're saying there about exploring different spaces and different things and doing something that they're not known for, I think the electronic music world is based off that exploration, because everybody's instrument is their entire studio, how big or small that is, and there's there's some sonic consistencies with certain genres or subgenres that if you're writing in that space, you maybe need to adhere to a little bit, but after that, the world's your oyster. Like, absolutely go crazy with it. And honestly, that's what kind of got me back into techno music, was I felt like, in terms of music for dance floors and music that was played at clubs, it had the, like, okay, sure, a 4 on the floor beat for the majority of the music, but sonically speaking, there's no bounce, like, and tempo wise, and the crossover with, like, from broken beat techno to things in the dub realm and ambient music and industrial music, like, I think there's no more like an intersection point in music, in electronic music. I'm not sure there's another main genre that has any more stems coming off of it,
It's when people ask me kind of about electronic music in particular in clubs, I always equate it that electronic music, like techno, like Gorgamish, let's say Gorgamish, for example, electronic music in that club is no different than the 50s and 60s when swing music was happening. That people, it's psychologically giving people a night out to dance, a night out away from their families, to appreciate music, to appreciate the artists that are on stage performing, and whether it's electronic music or swing music, I feel like those I don't want to say demographic, but that audience are very similar. And the moment that I explain that to like a 60-year-old who doesn't get, they're like, oh, I remember the feeling of going out to see a swing band. I'm like, well, that's how teenagers, or that's how people were feeling going and listening to electronic music at a club. And they're like, oh, I get it now. That makes perfect sense.
And the proof of that, interestingly, is techno swing, like artists like Little Sis Nora and stuff like that. Wow. I mean, those, it works. It totally works.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to cross over, like, or more organically played music with electronics. And I literally was sitting with a friend this afternoon, and we were talking about the hip hop producer Jay Dilla, who the way he programmed an MPC completely changed how people look at that piece of equipment, completely changed how people approach rap music and what you can do with it sonically. Like I grew up listening to Aphex Twin, and Aphex Twin, Richard D. James is one of my favorite artists of all time, and I will listen to him until I expire. Jay Dilla is the Aphex Twin of hip hop production. He was so far ahead of the game that it was bending the way that equipment was supposed to be used. And I think when you can make electronics have that organic feeling, there you have your instant crossover right there. You 100% do, and that's pretty cool to see.
I'm so glad you brought up, because that's kind of the next thing I really wanted to talk about, was specifically collaborations. Is that, but I do want to respond to what you were saying about how the technology can influence the music itself, because obviously the elephant in the room is like the 808, influencing hip hop in particular. Totally. The moment people hear that, they're like, "That's hip hop music." Yeah, it is. What is that piece of gear? No idea. I'm not going to tell you what that piece of gear is. But
that's the Buddy Rich of gear.
That's hip hop, by the way, in case you're wondering, is that electronic sound. So, but I also think about specifically, there's a lot, especially in the past, I want to say 2 decades, let's say. And you mentioned it, Sean, with Tommy Lee, is collaborations, but between like people taking drum and bass core and putting pop music on top, like Katy Perry on top of it, and it suddenly becomes a pop song. But really, everybody who knows that's in the circle is listening, going, "That's drum and bass underneath there. That's all that is. That's Netsky with
totally.
You know what I mean?
And
I wonder about that. Are you doing a lot more collaborations with non-techno artists? We certainly heard one at the very beginning, but are you enjoying that? I doubt you'd say no, but you know what I mean. Yeah. I feel like you would love everything. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Going back to the album that I have coming out later this year. Working on that intro track with Mellow Hollow. I wish, honestly, just with where I live and COVID and all the rest of it, I wish we could have sat in the room and really plugged it out together. But honestly, the performance and what was given back to me to mix the track down from Amanda and Nathan was absolutely incredible. Nathan played guitar on it, Amanda obviously sang on it, but then I did a track that it's near the tail end of the album, and it goes off into a big exploratory noise stands at the end there. But the first part of it is almost a conventional, like, industrial rock song. And I had a really close friend of mine, Jameson Presti, do vocals on it, because we grew up playing in bands together. And Rhett Williams, Burning Chrome, ended up playing the guitars on it. And they ended up sounding like an absolute buzzsaw, just incredible. And that's, again, melding the electronics with live instrumentation, collaboration. Not so much in the techno-centric genres, like it's not pure techno music, those tracks that I'm working on with them. Yes. But I think that might be my history of playing in bands coming out a little bit in that. You know what I mean? Like wanting to play music with people.
Yeah.
To the best of our abilities right now. Again, with at the time those tracks were written, everyone was kind of in like some form of lockdown ridiculousness. I don't know.
Would it be inappropriate if I press play on this Reduced to Ashes? Can I drop the needle in one spot quickly,
Ashes,
or no?
Yeah, no.
Is that the one with Jameson?
It is, yeah. And I will tell you where you should maybe drop that needle.
Cool.
I would say
I'm on the SoundCloud.
Yeah, that's great. You should potentially drop it at about 103.
103 it is.
About a minute in or so. Yeah, a minute in or so.
Here we go. 1 minute coming up. Oh, wait.
Yep, that's fine.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
Let me turn that down a bit. Yeah. That's rad. And you can hear the drumming influences in particular in there. It sounds super Nine Inch Nails. I love that. That's really, really heavy.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
No, I mean that in a super rad way. The
totally.
production is great.
I was also gonna throw in there that it sounds a bit like Econoline Crush as well.
Oh, I love Econoline. Yeah.
I loved Econoline Crush when I was in high school. It was cool to know that they were from Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
The band was
Canadian
Trevor's
for sure?
actually. Yeah, Trevor's from. I grew up around the city where Trevor was born in Minnedosa, Manitoba, and I played in a couple bands that Trevor played in, and one of my buddies played with him. But yeah, they are based out of Vancouver.
Cool.
I remember being so proud to hear that there was a band that sounded like that so close to home, because I live in Prince Rupert, BC, and I grew up here.
Nice.
And I was dreaming of moving to the city, you know what I mean, and doing all that, and it was super super cool to know that there were bands from there doing that sound. It was wild to me.
Yeah. And interestingly, as growing up and watching Trevor played in a band called Kilgore Trout, which was kind of around Manitoba and Ontario. They were fairly they were kind of a cover band, but Trevor was really big into the very early stages of EDM and what was to become Nine Inch Nails, and that he was very big on how he could piece those two together. And I remember I think it was he was the first kick at the can, I believe. He was in a band and he was trying to convince the guitar player to use the Korg guitar synth, and it was he was literally offering, I'll buy you it, I just want you to try it. I just want you to try it. And he had all these ideas, and it was dude was way ahead of his time.
Cool.
That's fantastic. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So in this last song, what was happening in that in particular, production wise? Because it sounded like there was some cool drums happening. If we're
very cool.
Drums. Yeah.
That song, kind of a funny way about it, the way that it was written. I structured out. Well, I was kind of noodling with my modular first, and I created this line on it that I just knew I had to track, and I didn't have any drum programming, anything, so I just recorded it to a click and modulated it and mangled the hell out of it for probably 7 or 8 minutes. Then I went back and programmed some drums to it, and I kind of went back and forth with what I wanted it to, what the drum programming wanted, how it wanted to live. The two ideas were something a lot more sample based, early 90s Machines of Loving Grace kind of style, which ultimately ended up taking on that form. The other was going to be creating drum sounds with the Moog Mother 32, which is not a drum machine by any means, but I just wanted to use a synthesizer to create analog drum sounds and modulate them that way, and turn it. And the sonic characteristic would be completely different both ways. And again, like I said, it kind of went the way of the more sample based style, and then structuring and arranging it. And then I knew I wanted to have guitars, and I wrote a guitar part for the chorus, and then I was like, Rhett, I suck at guitars, can you re-record that for me? And also you have carte blanche to write riffs for the verse. And he was like, oh, awesome. Yeah, fantastic. And then a couple days later, he sent me a whole schwack of tracks. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Fleshed that out a little more. And then I got Jameson on board and was just like, hey, let's sit down. Let's make it comfortable. We hadn't worked on music in a long time together. But we used to play, like I said, we used to play in bands together. We sat in the studio, kept it very light. The writing of the song came the lyrics came very quickly. But once it was all there, it was the mixing phase that was daunting, because I usually in the techno world, I'll deal with very few tracks, and I'll commit to layering tracks together. And like, I guess you would have back in the day, it would have been putting it on tape, and that's your level of commitment. It's on there. The reverb's on tape. Well, the reverb's there. Deal with it, So I usually will deal with very limited tracks and commit to decisions that inherently kind of make the track, give it its characteristic. But with this song, for whatever reason, my track management just went out the window. I probably had like 40 plus audio tracks and my dog going, and just like, it was a nightmare. But then, once it all kind of made sense and we mixed it down, the last thing that was put down were the drums, because I left space for the drums to live. And it was just like with that track alone that I did too. I wrote all the music for it, sent it to Mellow Hollow. They sent me back the vocals and the guitars. Then I put the drums on after. And to me, it's always been, especially with electronic music, it's not a drum focus first. Even though the approach to the arrangement and like the rhythms and things, yes, it's always going to be there. When you play drums, you can't walk down a hallway holding a grocery bag without tapping it and feeling it, right? It's just it's a part of it.
Agreed.
But the actual instrument, the drum set in this application becomes a more textural thing, and almost it's not the forefront. It's like I will very happily distort the shit out of the master bus of all my drum groups, because it's just another instrument. It's another synthesizer. It's another texture. I might go back and chop those drums up and resample them and turn them into something different later, so
I'm so glad you said that.
Fully texture first.
We've talked about it on Groundwork.
That's the way I look at it.
I want to keep in that mindset, because we've talked about it during Groundwork meetups, where and conveniently, most people don't know that everybody knows that I press play on all the music here for everybody in the community to be able to listen to during the live stream, and I've got the cleanest sound happening right here directly from my rig. And we talk about it more often than not, that the drums, just like you said, drums are separate. Like the hi-hats have a place in the mix. The kick drum has a place and a frequency that's very particular to certain styles of music. And I've heard you guys talk about it. Techno bass drum versus EDM bass drum versus rock bass drum. They're all EQ'd a very certain way culturally within that music as well. But everything kind of sits in its place. And I'm really happy to hear you say that all those elements are just like another synthesizer. They're just another thing, where typically a drummer would be like, this is all one thing, in case you're wondering. I play this as one thing. You're extrapolating it all. That's really cool to hear. Can you maybe, I don't know how you can expand on that mindset, you know?
Well, I think when you spend time programming an instrument, especially like let's say you're programming a drum machine or a soft synth drum machine or whatever the case is, you're spending time programming one instance at a time. So your relationship with the hi-hat is going to be a different relationship than with the kick drum. But when it comes to mixing with buses and things like that, and grouping things together for compression's sake and all the rest of that, that's when you start having to make those relationships concrete. Like, okay, well, now my kick drum needs to have a very glued relationship with my sub, because that's the foundation of all of it. So regardless of everything else that's happening in the song, if your kick is shit and your sub is shit, your track's shit. And that's just the way it goes. It's just like fundamentals in mixing a rock record or whatever the case is. But, you know, and it's just like if you mix too much high end in your tops bus with your hi-hats, your rides, your shakers, and whatever, if there's, you know, the balance isn't right, it's not going to be good. But again, kind of going back, I think the difference with drummers and the relationship to their drum set, as opposed to somebody programming a drum machine, is you're in that singular mode maybe a lot more in the initial thought process, where when you sit behind a kit, the first thing you do is you pump that right foot, and your right hand's probably coming down, you know, you're instantly in the groove, like fully. So
Yeah.
I know I found in doing our album, I found that exact feeling, that there was a hindrance to playing some of my parts as a drummer because I couldn't get outside of the mindset of the drummer. And when I would come back, and often I would just do a take, not even necessarily to all of our music, but to the tempo for sure. And maybe like a piece of the chorus and maybe a verse, but I wouldn't really commit to the whole song. And then I would take those pieces and I would split them up into each channel. And interestingly, like, and exactly what you said, Goat, is that I all of a sudden had these relationships happening that were no longer like a drum set. It was like, wow, that could be something. This could be this. That doesn't need to be this. But then what it also did was I realized, because I was now behind a production desk, I realized how kind of quantized and square some of my approach was in the drumming realm. I was just like, shit, this is too obvious for me. I should be this. There's other things I could be doing here. And I found it an amazing tool. Then I would go back up and I would actually edit stuff that was like, I would like to hear this. And I would do that. And then I would go up and play it. And as fucking weird as it felt, it was all of a sudden like, it was an ability almost to kind of see into another world and then make that bridge into that world. And then interestingly, it returns back as a drum groove, but it's a groove I never came up with on my own. I had to do it.
Come up with right.
I had to do it through another way to get to it, but it was a tool that was invaluable to me.
I think that's a super interesting thing that you touch on, and I think drummers have that innate ability based purely off where most of the time they're situated in a stage setting, and that's behind everybody. And you know, you're watching the band play. As you're playing, you're doing a lot more watching than anyone else in the band. So your ability to focus in on arrangement and focus in on what other people are doing might, and you know, this is just my perspective, but it might just be that little bit more than the guitar player playing or the bass player playing, because you're watching both of them while you're doing you.
Exactly.
They may not have that ability, physically speaking, where they're situated on stage. So I know Charlie Clouser, again, a nails drop there. Charlie Clouser is also a composer and an arranger and a remixer and played synthesizers for nails or whatever. I know that he also played drums first, and he was somebody that mentioned that, and it always had me thinking in the back of my mind, like, my ability to structure songs, it always felt really natural. When I sat down and started writing music, I was just like, this goes here and this goes here and this makes sense to me. And when it comes up, there's your song, and then, okay, it makes sense, you know. I don't know if that's just a drummer, if I'm just toting our horn, a drummer, hey.
Sure, but, it's what we do here.
Or if it's something that, you know, is a part of our skill set, you know, like as a drummer, your ability to, you know, accept that data and regurgitate it out in a different kind of direction might be easier. You know what I mean?
I think we're used to directing traffic a lot of the time, at least within every like 100% of the traffic. 100% of the bands I've ever played in, I'm the one going, here we go, like, ending one more time, loop it, solo, whatever. Like, I'm the guy that calls the shots, and that might be because I'm a bit of a bully when I get in the band, because I'm just like, everybody look at me, I'll call it. If you guys aren't going to do it, I'll do it. Sounds good. If it's not clear what's going on, I'm the guy doing it. And you're absolutely right that I just get used to eyeballing. I've got a joke with every guitar player I've ever played with, where if he's doing a guitar solo, I don't call the end of the solo until he's below the 5th fret. It's kind of an inside rule that if he's soloing, if he makes his way down to below the 5th fret while he's soloing, I know that's we're moving out. Good to go.
It's time to go.
Totally right. And I have these little bit of rules.
The combat zone.
That's exactly. But if he's staying up on those high notes, I'm not going to call the end of the solo. Like, let's figure it out. But I'm the one kind of calling the shots here. And with that being said, maybe that's why I truly enjoy producing, is because I can kind of see all angles of what all the other instruments are capable of doing, and the personalities behind all those instruments. I might know a few limitations of what those instruments can do, because I do play majority of them as well. Because let's be clear, a lot of drummers play many other instruments as well, where a guitarist would typically just play guitar and sing. You know what I mean? And you know it's the end of the rehearsal when they get on the drum kit. But
but I think there's also an element, like I had a conversation.
Sorry, I'm rambling, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
I had a conversation with Dave Weckl about this, and because I have this thing about like toms and like angles and stuff. Yeah. And I'm very finicky, and literally, like, I could have a tom in such a way that you could tilt it one way, and I just, like, you fucking wrecked my day. I can't play that. I'm not playing it. Right? I refuse. Refuse. Yeah, yes. Or if I watch drummers with the toms like this and their cymbals like everything's 90 degrees, and it just drives. It's like, how are you drumming like this, right? Yeah. But I think
everybody's got their own journey, Sean. Stop judging people.
Sort of what Weckl said was, that's what makes us such great arrangers. He said is part of the act of drumming is arranging things. You have to arrange your drum set in such a way that it's comfortable for you. And each of us are so different. A guitar fretboard, other than the fact of the way, you know, how the action is set, or maybe they play scallop frets, or maybe they don't, maybe the string gauge. Beyond that, though, the guitar itself is set. A piano is set. A trumpet is set. Everything is set. A drum set is not set. It's not one thing. It's tilted. It's you have the ability to have, and I think it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because we have this ability to manipulate physically what's in front of us, right? Wow. We're not subservient to the guitar. You know what I mean? So I think that actually plays a part in the abilities for us to go beyond and experiment and say, I wonder. You know what I mean? Like,
you mentioned something about just adding things there, and I remember when I was in my 20s, and I was into a lot of like the garage bands at the time, and they were playing, you know, 4-piece kits, a ride, a crash, you know, and that was it. And I was like, I was playing something a little bigger at the time with floor toms on both sides and a 10-inch auxiliary snare.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Just like something a little more expansive and stuff. And I felt like that made sense to me ergonomically speaking.
Yep.
But I was always like, I felt like I was scared to add extra things to the drum set because of its ability to change your approach to how you go about playing. And I didn't want, again, it was one of those things where I was like, I like how I play. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I don't want this to completely hamper my approach to this. And I have a good thing going here, what I felt like at least. So stripping back felt natural, but adding to it did not. And that's a funny thing too, because like you said, with guitar players, there's different things you can add, different cabs, different speakers,
pedals, maybe
all kinds of things, and on that small level, guitar picks or string gauges, but like not to the level of, we're talking about like, oh, do you got a brass with chrome wrapped snare? Are you playing on a maple kit? Are you playing with different, what kind of beater head are you using on your bass, on your kick pedal, all these different things. There's the angles, the physical angles of where things sit. It's just so flexible and modular, and I use that term way too much, but
no, it's perfect. Well, because to actually segue it into, by the way, there on my rider when I was doing more touring, there wasn't a throne that wouldn't go low enough for me, like nobody, so I had to take my throne everywhere. And that the customize, I couldn't really, if the throne was not sitting at a right height, I was screwed for the whole night. The throne alone was going to mess up my entire show. But the throne alone made it so that I couldn't perform. Sorry guys, the night was shit because
what would Buddy
my throne
Rich
was down
do?
1 inch. Okay. Who's that guy? But it got me wondering.
Off my wall.
I love it. But it makes me think about synth culture, and that there's a celebration of how you're setting up all your synths, in what order, what you physically have. I learned the hard way. Well, it's not the hard way. While I was at Roland, when we started introducing some modular stuff, about how amazing people take pride in having cables everywhere on their desk. Like there's a pride of having it messy within PA and having, right? And it's funny, like that looks really good back there, but I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, he made that. He doesn't normally have it that way. He can't normally have it that way. It's got to be cables everywhere.
For my basket of cables.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a culture. There's a culture.
Got a big handful of spaghetti.
Yes, I know how you feel. But I think the culture of customizing and the culture of having an original rig is something to take pride in, very much like a drummer, I would think, maybe.
Yeah.
Agree, disagree?
I agree to a certain extent. I think it comes down to your approach. There's, people who write the most amazing music with just their laptop, not even a MIDI controller, just drawing in notes on a piano roll. The stuff sounds incredible. And there's people that have every single incredible synthesizer in the world that, it's not, it's not the greatest music, maybe. It can go both ways. You can have every synth in the world and write incredible stuff and not know what the hell you're doing on Ableton Live or Reason or whatever the hell you're using, but it's all about your approach. It 100% is what you want to be doing. For example, I am waiting for my shipment of an MPC-1 to show up this week. Okay. And I decided to dive into the MPC world, Basically, that's going to be like learning a new DAW, but it will get me out of producing in the computer as well. It'll also be one of these things where I'll be able to go back to older tracks of mine and put them, sample them in there and reimagine them in a live setting with modular synthesizers and all kinds of different things. it'll also, on a drummer centric kind of a way, the 16 pads of an MPC lend itself to finger drumming, something I don't do, but something that I'm sure I'll be forced to, explore to a certain extent.
It's such a cool culture.
It's kind of a cool thing where, and that thing, like you could do everything in there. You could do absolutely everything in there. You wouldn't even need a laptop.
I'm seeing the sequencing. That's how you can't see the screen. I'm seeing the sequencing right here, which is awesome. The finger drumming, I have to admit, I have a lot of fun finger drumming. It's really addictive. Anybody who doesn't know how to do it can still be drawn in to do it. It's pretty cool.
There's some incredible finger drummers online doing some just wild stuff. Arab music. Go check out his stuff on YouTube. It is bonkers, and he plays on would it have been an MPC 3000 maybe, I think, because these pieces of gear have been around since like the late 80s. I think Roger Lynn, who made the Lynn drum, grouped up with the Kai in like 1988, I think, to build these things at first. So but
that's a big name in electronics.
True.
big name. Yeah.
Do you think that
go for it.
No, I was going to say, do you think that people who gravitate towards this would never sit behind a drum kit, or vice versa, or is it just two different worlds, very different worlds, I guess?
I think there's crossover because I'm going to be living through that, but I think it comes down to what your musical tastes are, because like if you're, maybe not as into the electronic music for whatever reasons, you may not want to go down this route. You know what I mean? Or if you're a drummer and you just don't listen to electronic music, you probably wouldn't. I would.
Yeah, I imagine it just like our previous conversation that all the grids, a drummer, quote unquote, I say that loosely, but a drummer would hit it and go, oh, okay, that's a hi-hat. Oh, this is a bass drum. And they might try to play it like a drum kit, where a lot of the time you're using them as input sources for those individual sounds. And I'll say that loosely as well. They're just sounds that you happen to be layering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I know like this piece of equipment particularly is, used in hip hop and rap music and that kind of a thing. That's where it's, most popular. But you can write any kind of music on MPC. So there may be more crossover there than I'm willing to admit, but
Sure.
I think at the same time too, when you look at it, if we look at it from the Western standpoint of how a drum set looks, how a drummer sounds, and as I'm sitting here and it's like, wow, that would be kind of cool to try and say have a kick and a hi-hat, or kick and actually, or two roll-in kick pedals that could be anything, and that setup, and then just even what you could kind of come up with by utilizing your fingers. Because I'm thinking of, you take someone like say Salva Ganesh or Zakir Hussain, who are prominent Indian drummers who play tabla, they play doumbek, their technique is all fingers. So it would be very interesting to see how they would approach this, because as drummers, we think kick, snare, hat, blah, blah, blah. But a large percent of drummers in this world don't play the way, they don't play with limbs, they play with their fingers. And so this is actually kind of true to the craft.
Very interesting.
That is a very, very deep thought there for sure, and something that, if you're not, if you haven't experienced that kind of music, you just wouldn't be thinking about it, right? But it's so true. 100% spot on.
Yeah. So because you could literally listen to Zakir, watch his technique, and I'm thinking, because I've seen a duo in Seattle play with one of these. She played it, and the guy played guitar, and it was fucking awesome. I mean, it was such a unique sounding duo because she wasn't thinking linear. like the way I would think to play drums. She was thinking nonlinear.
Yeah.
And I would fair guess if you sat down with someone like Zakir or Pete Lockett or someone who played a hand drum, Selva Ganesh is a master at that. You would do yourself a world of good to then apply those techniques and go, shit, wow, like look what I could do. I mean, now you've got 10 digits as opposed to 4 limbs, right?
Roland, percussion. So Roland did have their percussion, their HPD 20, if you remember it. HPD 20. I'm going to pull that up really quick here. HPD 20, which is, there you go. Yoink. Yoink.
You're not at Roland anymore, are you, Paul?
No, but I just remember that it exists, so I'm going to bring it up. Because we're talking about it.
That's a great unit, actually.
Right? Yeah. And so this, I remember before we launched it, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you know Scott Fox Goat from Ivardensphere. He's from Edmonton.
The name doesn't sound familiar.
Industrial, heavy industrial music.
Okay.
And I knew that this was down the pipeline. I knew that we were going to launch this, so I connected with Scott because I knew Scott while we were on tour with him. And because he has a whole bunch of hand drummers on stage with him, he uses a lot of percussion, kind of like Left Spine Down. Like it's really like lots of percussion on stage. And so we got him to take the prototype out on tour with him, and he really enjoyed it because he could treat it like a djembe. He could treat it like he could just put sounds on it, like MIDI wise. He could put anything he wanted, but it didn't really inhibit his love of like hitting a drum like you would like a djembe traditionally, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to an MPC where you'd have to like really target your fingers. You could use this in a percussive style, but still generate electronic sounds. So I thought that was really cool. Sadly, this piece of gear fizzled. It really didn't have a good market. It really tried to hit, like Sean said, like, hey, tabla players, why don't you come over and play this?
Yeah.
And tabla people are like, no, thank you.
No.
In case you're wondering.
But see, and to me, that's
but
the flip
electronic
side.
is like, I'm in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's the flip side to what we were talking about earlier about how drummers are good at the arrangement side. I think there's also a level of change is not welcome by a lot of, like you mentioned, especially tabla players and even cultural rhythm instruments that require a lot of discipline, and there's one way to play. So I think sometimes the electronic gear is a hard sell on the flip side to drummers because we are so, like, even you look at the way an electronic drum set is made up to look like an acoustic kit, and yet
Correct.
the acoustic kits are limiting in as far as what sounds like what, and an electronic drum isn't. Like your hi-hat could be a snare. Let's face it. We set it up to look like this limiting thing, and it's just emulating what we know. So there's also this fear that drummers have of going outside of the sphere and saying, well, maybe I could have a 10-inch tom to the side here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Careful.
Or maybe it was okay that Keith Moon didn't use a hi-hat. What?
Yeah. Going against the norm.
Yeah.
Do we feel like
Rich played a double kick?
Right?
I guess we'll never know. Exactly.
We will never know.
I guess we'll never know.
Never know.
Do we feel like electronic music, I guess is what we're getting at. Electronic music and electronic drum programming is very foreign to a traditional drummer. Very foreign. Because at least who I've spoken to. I really feel like it. And it used to be an internal conversation we had at Roland where, I don't know if you know, we've talked about this, Sean. If anybody knows Jedi lore, you're not just handed a lightsaber there, bud. You gotta find the kyber crystal. You gotta go through the trials. You've actually got to assemble your lightsaber. You have to train properly. You have an apprentice. There's a whole rigmarole to it. And we always talked about it as drummers. Is that how many drummers do we know that don't even know how to tune their drums at all?
Mm-hmm.
How many drummers don't necessarily understand the difference between certain types of sticks? Who don't who have had their drum kit set up the same way since the first day they started playing at the age of 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I do feel like there should be a rite of passage. Oh my God, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth here, but maybe a rite of passage with a lot of instruments where you have to build your own snare drum. You have to build it. You have to hunt down the parts. You got to put it together. You have to assemble it, and then you've got to go through certain things. But once you understand it fully, which also includes, by the way, drum programming now, playing to backing tracks, understanding how to play to a click. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of those elements kind of make you the all-rounded drummer that can get the call from anybody in the world.
Oh, I'd be interested to pull my friends and say, how many of you right now, cold, could go do a gig and run Ableton Live?
0. Exactly. Yeah. Like the GOAT is already ahead of us here, right?
Well, yeah, and I think,
but what's the end goal though? Ultimately.
True. Yeah.
Well, does it need to be a part of the drummer lexicon?
That's the question.
Does it have to?
Well, I always have that conversation when people are like, I want to drum for Katy Perry someday. I use Katy as an example. I want to drum for Katy Perry someday. I'm like, great. Do you know how to play to backing tracks? Well, no, do you know how to play to a click? Well, clicks make you feel unhuman. Well, if you want to play those gigs, these are essentials to be able to do that. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it doesn't necessarily involve you like having fun behind the drum kit. You actually got to double down and focus on these type of things as well, right?
Yeah, and I also feel like for the end game, I do honestly feel though that the end game ultimately, as we sort of evolve in the next 20 years, I think it is going to become kind of a necessary equipment. Like, I even think of the gig that I did in China and bands that played in sort of competing hotels. Say 90% of them knew how to run tracks. They had some form of software with their kit, or they were playing a completely electronic kit. Because that's just at a cover level. I'm not even talking about being an artist. So it's just as a gigging cover drummer, for example, like think about Vegas. Like if you've got your tuned up Pearl export kit, but then the band down the street, he's got a TD50 or she's got a TD50, and you're able to do that. I've got that sound and I've got that sound. Oh, and I downloaded that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be working.
Oh, that's how I heard Omar Hakim got the Madonna gig.
Yeah.
He actually showed up with an electronic drum kit with the sounds from the album, and they were like, "That's amazing, done. You're the guy."
Yeah. And I'm sure I know there are circles where it's cool. It's like blues and jazz circles, but I think in a lot of ways, the more that we're hybriding and crossing paths, I think that electronics are just going to start playing just such a bigger part. I even like, it hasn't really hit here, but again, when we were over in Asia, many of the clubs they don't even allow acoustic drums. It's like it's all electronic because they don't want the noise level, number one. Number two, the silent discos are huge. And like electronic bands can do that. They can do that. Drummers with electronic gear can do that, but acoustic drummers can't.
Right.
There's that level of control there for sure.
Yeah. And I'm certainly not knocking acoustic drums. Like I said, I love the instrument, but I just think that we're kind of the last species to like hold on with all of our might to like letting go of,
Are you saying cavemen started it and the year 2022 ended it?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well,
all acoustic drums are done. Sorry, caveman.
I have a lot of fear for people when I'm picking on drummers because it happens to be Drum Geek, but
Totally.
It's just when I drop words like DAW or VST or VSTI, and I have a drum friend who gives me like, And he's nodding his head, but I'm like, you have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? I just kind of feel bad in a lot of ways, because it's like there's like a whole world you're sort of missing. Like, it's I wish I could explain it, but man, there's just this whole world that you're not going to be able to take part in.
Well, like
I
Goat
think
said,
that,
do they have to?
you kind of
Yeah.
it's and I want to touch on that too. It's like with the styles and genres that are a little more traditional in scope, your blues and jazz, and that it's jazz, maybe not, because by nature it's a little more open,
it's a progressive music,
right?
yeah.
So
True.
That's right. But like blues for sure, there's tradition there, or even, for example, you were talking about the hand drum module there,
Yes.
and tabla players not jumping on board with that. Well, because they're playing traditional forms of music, like
That's true.
I think those forms to them hold a lot more weight than someone, we grew up hearing rock music, we grew up hearing these things, and maybe they are a part of our identity, but not culturally for thousands or whatever, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, like other cultures might have. So I think there's weight there, but I think in due time with electronics, I think you might be right on that. From a drummer's perspective, I think from anyone who's playing an instrument where there's a level of physicality to it and a skill set to it, the concept of looking at a screen like a Ableton Live or even a drum machine and being like, oh, okay, I'm just pushing buttons. I've hacked myself down and whittled myself down. All this physicality and sweat, blood, and all the and tears and everything. And now I'm just pushing buttons to recreate these grooves. I definitely can understand where the hesitation would come from. I totally
for sure
would. But the where you can go with it, if you can just not even move forward, but take that step sideways to look. Oh man, the world's, it's so open. It's so entirely open. It's like, it's changed how I program synth lines and bass lines and things because of how I play drums. Filling in the spaces where ghost notes would be is where additional percussion elements or little ear candy elements or whatever sit. It makes tracks more dense, and that kind of a thing.
Could you imagine on I'll give you a small example. One of my favorite synthwave bands is the Midnight. I love the Midnight a lot, and I saw some footage of them online where they were playing with a acoustic drummer, and I was kind of let down. I was like, oh, I was like, this is electronic, and you just kind of brought it out of the realm of electronic for me, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. As a matter of fact, I was like, no, I won't be listening. Like, I won't watch that video. I got taken out entirely. But then when I think of like Michael Schack with Netsky, where it's drum and bass, where he's drumming the drum and bass, I always wonder if the writing of the music in the composer's head, he's like, I know that a physical drummer is going to be performing this. So I might write the components like that. Is there any point in any of your collaborations where you've considered that a drummer might be playing whatever you're composing? It might be no.
The short answer is the short answer is no. The long answer is everything's up for interpretation, and that's something that excites me, especially with electronic music. Is something, if it was programmed and if it was super quantized 16th notes, rigid, but then all of a sudden that loop or that whatever it is pulled out and played live by a live musician, it takes on its own, it takes on a different world, a different kind of, sound. And to some that, like you said, in your example, it might not be what you're looking for. It might completely not be to your taste.
Sound like a band doing a cover of it.
The art.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. And it can either come off that way or it can take on a whole new life, depending on how much of this song that maybe was completely programmed has been humanized, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if
done.
anyone's going to want to play, quarter notes on a kick drum at 140 beats per minute with all my stuff and a bunch of, tom trigger samples doing things that don't sound like toms.
Yes,
from a
this guy.
drummer's perspective, I don't know. That doesn't
Yes.
that
Totally.
to me that doesn't sound like the most fun, but again,
Sure.
personal taste, right? Personal
Yes.
taste.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
I think also it can come down to like discoverability, like we were talking about earlier. One of the more recent discoveries, I'm not sure, I don't know that it's a recent album per se, but Peter Gabriel released a bunch of stuff that he had done and covers he had wanted to do on this Flotsam and Jetsam project that he did. And he had a lot of remixes done and a lot of DJ / production people worked on it. And he
Yes.
does a cover of like Strawberry Fields and stuff he's always kind of wanted to do, but he couldn't have imagined it in the way that he wanted to imagine it until now with all these remixes. And some of it's definitely not my bag, but I can't help but think, my God, there's some things, and there are some people discovering Peter Gabriel again because of this project. It's like he's made himself yet again that much more accessible to an audience that maybe wouldn't have discovered him or maybe wouldn't have listened to him even. And I just, one of the parts of our business plan, my wife and I, is totally releasing an album and then finding a producer to remix it for an EDM release. And I'm like, why not?
That's
Like, because it's going to
very
be
funny that you mentioned that.
Go
Right.
for it.
It's a part of the album that I have coming out this year. We'll have 2 follow-up remix EPs done by artists from all over the place. I will mention there's Joel West is on there remixing.
cool.
Mastercraft is on there
Oh, yeah.
remixing. Japanese artist Risa Taniguchi is remixing. One of my favorite German artists, Alex Bau, is remixing. And the idea was to reimagine these songs in ways that they were not going to live,
Exactly.
So like, for example, when Jesse sent me the Mastercraft remix of Reduced to Ashes, it's 140 beats per minute, balls to the wall techno,
Yes.
just slams.
Yeah.
And it's cool that way. Risa Taniguchi, for example, remixed a song that I did called Vulcanize. It's 140 beats per minute, straight ahead, industrial techno, like rave synth lines. She sent back an 8-minute broken beat, masterpiece. It sounds incredible and pummeling, and just the beauty of the remix altogether. If we're talking about drumming and stuff, somebody like Butch Vig, for example.
Yeah.
Butch
Yes.
Vig is one of the, in my opinion, one of the, I don't know if this is the godfathers of drum production with electronics in mind.
Yep. Totally.
And he
Yes.
took
Totally.
a drum set first approach to everything, and it became the sound of that era for a while,
Yep.
Correct.
Correct. Then you go back and look at what he ended up producing, from a rock perspective, and it's just like, well, he's the man, So
Yes.
but I think remixes can give you that ability, and it's like a secret weapon for drummers, because if I would say most people, when they sit down and they start producing electronic music, the first thing you're going to work on is a drum beat or a loop or something.
Yeah.
And if that's something that is second nature to you, then there you go. You're ahead of the game. You're already done. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
I feel like
get
that's
up
your
at 5 a.m.
sound.
and do it. Make
Yeah,
that loop.
agreed. 100%, 100, dude. Do you I'm so glad you mentioned remixes, because remixes are super deep in electronic music in particular, it's not unusual for everybody to be doing remixes of each other's music, and it's just a community building for that matter. But you always want to, if you hear a cool song, you're like, I want to remix that in my style. And I think about the fact that, you know, Dead Mouse has a unique sound to him. I'm a big fan of Bonobo. So like Bonobo, Simon has a very, very specific sound to him that when you hear one of his remixes, you're like, that's totally Bonobo. And I've got to go to the credits and I'm like, oh, that's obscure, but yeah, that's totally him, because I can hear that in him, and he gets open to a whole new audience. Is that when you're doing remixes for people, what is your mindset on that? Are you trying to keep close to your style of production on top of their stuff, or like, kind of what's your mindset?
I have an approach to remixes that I am not sure is the most popular.
Cool.
It's something
We like that.
I've kind of it's something that, you know, it's a part of how I approach remixes, and it is taking the original source material and not fully using every stem or everything. I like to reimagine it in a different context completely.
Cool.
And one good example of that is listening to Joel West's Pulse Response that just came out on Friday, and listen through the remixes on that, and then listen to my remix of it as well. Or you know, if you check out the Beatport link or whatever, you
got
can
it here. Yeah.
go through the samples there, and you'll just see, you know, how my approach might be a little bit different than, and it's like, again, I say it might not be the most popular method of remixing, but it's my favorite remixers did it like that, and I just kind of, as a kid, it was maybe those formative years of listening to remixes and being like, oh, it doesn't have to sound like the original track. Cool. I want to write music anyway. I don't want to be limited to, you know, boundaries and walls and stuff set up anyway. So
yeah, totally, I agree. I think because I think what's the point of copying what the original track was, and especially as a band, like if I'm asking someone to remix, then the implication is I want your interpretation of it, not necessarily, yeah, absolutely, I want maybe specific parts. But even Tracy Chapman listened to one of her remixes and said, that's beautiful. She says, I couldn't even wrote it that beautiful, because it was someone was whoever the remix artist was, it affected them in such a deep way that the way that they felt the song again was different than what Tracy felt, and again they felt it like at 130 beats per minute. But it just, again, that door was open and a whole bunch of people discovered Fast Car that would have, you know, otherwise never would have discovered it. And
Interesting. Yeah.
you know,
and I think too, with remixing aside too, it's like I take that boundless approach first, but I also feel like you don't get to make, at least for me, I don't get to make the decision of how these stems are going to impact me. When I pull it open and I drop it out into the DAW, whatever jumps out at me and impacts me and resonates, that's what I'm going to focus on. And if it's a micro sample of something, shit, that's what this whole remix is going to be based off of. And it might not sound, it literally has the DNA of the original source material in it.
Yes.
But it may not fully be discernible as, you know, something you could recognize as a work pulled from the original, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I assume, and because I referred to you, I think even before you came into the waiting room before we started, I referred to you as the godfather of groundwork, because everybody reveres you quite heavily at groundwork. When you jump in chat, everybody loves it. Is that if you were to do a remix for certain people, they want that zhuzh. They want that. They want it to be torn apart. They want it goated. You know what I mean?
I hope so. It's nice to hear. Thanks, by the way. I hope so. I've remixed enough people now that if you go through those remixes and listen to the original source material, you know you're not going to get the original loop rehashed again, because I'm just, maybe it's not what's going to be the thing that resonates with me. But, you know, again, just how I kind of approach it, really. So.
And I think too, and if a drum, like if you're speaking in drummer terms or even maybe songwriter terms, I know there tends to be a bit of a hesitancy to quote unquote musicians who don't want to cross that line into they see DJs or EDM artists as maybe not legitimate artists, and you go, okay, well then let's extrapolate that down to let's look at a chef who's come up with some sort of dish that's, you know, like cordon bleu. So do we want cordon bleu for the rest of our lives, or do we want, you know, Gordon Ramsay to do, you know, put a bunch of salt forever on it, and do we want, you know, another this, you know, Aaron Sanchez to make a mole version of it? Like, you know what I mean? There's a beauty in tearing things apart,
yes,
and putting them back together in such a way. I mean, food trucks, for example, wouldn't have been on the scene if it wasn't for someone
remixing
like
food.
Kenny Choi. Exactly. This is the point, you know, like
Cross-pollinating.
Yeah.
Totally.
You know,
It's totally food remix. Wow.
Yeah, it is. Well, it really is, right? Because when you, otherwise it's just going to be that for the rest of your life, and that's so fucking boring sometimes. It's just like, you know.
You blew my mind there. Yeah, absolutely.
I personally have I want to talk on that too, is because I personally have an issue when purists just push that agenda so hard, because what has created all these new genres and subgenres and cultures and things like that has come from the fact that people were willing to cross-pollinate other styles and blend sounds and deeper, you know, cultures and things like that. If you're not doing that, you're living in the past. And I feel very firmly about that. I really do. Even when it comes down to when people talk about techno music and they're like, well, it doesn't have this and it should sound more like Detroit style and it should do this. And it's like, I love that Detroit style. I do. But we now are 30 some odd years past it. Let's see what the next sounds of this come. Like, let's see what happens from here. You know what I mean? And
that's right.
I've never said that out, but I really truly feel that way, you know?
I think about hip hop. How did hip hop feel? The hip hop community feel when Beastie Boys showed up?
Right.
And it's like,
oh man,
yikes! And then it's like, these guys are rad, and then all of a sudden, boom! Now you got Linkin Park. No, sorry.
And you know, like I make that statement, and that's not knocking where it came from.
Absolutely,
knocking the idea that where it comes from is the only thing it's allowed to be, and I don't think that's right. I think it needs to grow.
Evolution and evolve.
Yeah.
The evolution of styles is uber important, and I think you said something important there, is that a lot of people are going to be left behind if they're not open to the idea of cross pollination a lot of the time as well, right? But there is a place. Let's backpedal slightly. There is a place for purist bebop guys and purist jazz guys and purist hip hop guys. Sure. And there's elements to it that make it that. I listen to a lot of synthwave, as I said, and there's elements that are like almost key that if you don't hear those sounds, it's not really synthwave. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it suddenly gets into some other area, right?
Yeah. There's consistency in the sound set that needs to be there in order for people to differentiate. Oh, that's a house record. That's a techno record. That's a, you know, yes,
sure.
That's the truth. That's the truth. But when it comes down to pushing the genre itself, now pushing the genre itself is like, are we pushing all these sub genres with it, or are we talking about pushing one part of it? Like, that conversation's a whole other thing. But I just really truly believe that you need to always be looking to expand and always be looking to grow.
Yep.
And sometimes you're going to come up to points musically where you didn't like where the genre was taken, but that doesn't mean you need to live and die on that hill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you can go, if you're an artist, you can explore and you can change and you can do other things because it's a part of your journey, right? So
Yep.
yeah, that's a big one for me. That's a big one for me. And
Yeah.
it was
Cool.
maybe one of the main reasons why I liked industrial music growing up, because it was like, well, it's not really metal and it's not
Right.
really,
Yeah.
you know, in electronic music. It's kind of all of it put together, and it kind of sounds like punk music a bit. And then I heard Atari Teenage Riot, and I was like, oh my God, now punk music and electronic music live together, and everything's
Right. White Zombie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and even too, in a lot of ways, I look at it, say the resurgence of swing back in the 90s, the resurgence of vinyl now again, is those, it's
That's
those
funny.
little sort of, it's actually those hybrids and that expansion of music that we get away from certain things that they're able then to make a comeback 30 years later, because we haven't been fed that our whole, like, the past 3 decades. It hasn't just been 90s hip hop. It's taken on a different form. It's done this, so that in 30 years from now someone can go and rediscover it and go, what's this?
Yeah.
And then it makes this comeback, like the Alison Krauss Robert Plant record of kind of that rockabilly making a beautiful comeback with a guy who fucking sang for Led Zeppelin. Like, my God. Talk
Right.
about a beautiful return to something that, wow, who would have thunk, right?
Yeah.
And then again, thanks to the fact that it, let's have it go away for a little while.
And for full circle it back.
Yeah.
Hey, me and my brother are going to put together a hip hop band. Oh, like Beastie Boy? What do you mean? I don't know who they are. Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to go on. I'm doing this cool stuff. Yeah.
I'm gonna
it's been done, by the way.
I'm gonna
Welcome
sample
back.
Queen and sing rap.
Exactly. Thanks. Yeah. Doom, 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 doom. Oh my God. Sampling.
I'm gonna call myself Pasty Ice.
Pasty Ice. It's all been done before. I was thinking about when you're just on the heels of what you were just saying, when you're on playing festivals or when you're playing with a lot of other artists, are you trying to create a set that fits within the realm of the festival, or are you going in there going, people are getting what they're getting from this guy?
It's a little of column A and column B.
Cool.
There's definitely, especially with DJing, is like, playing and the selection and tone to be, fitting and suitable. But I think if you talk to a lot of DJs, they'll share the same sentiment that there's almost a level of educating that kind of comes with it, and pushing the sound. And here's one thing with my sets is you're not going to hear your favorite track. I'm not going to play the request of whatever and this and that. I want to color on a page. I want to create a soundscape that people are going to be like, wow, that was, I've never heard that before. I didn't know what to expect. It was this, it was, so again, a little bit of column A and column B. It's like you get, when I play those shows, you get that. But again, if I'm playing a venue where, it might be in a little bit of a sleepy quarter for a minute here, or people might be coming up, you play to that energy too. And I think as performers, you guys both know that you have to have that in your back pocket, or a part of it is not being done properly, right? So
yeah,
you can't just have the gas pedal down 100 miles an hour the whole time, even though we would all love that.
That's true. It's funny you say that, because I think that a lot of the time when we play in like cover bands, or if we're entertaining in clubs, in full band situations, you have your set list and you stick to it, the end, right? And the good bands that I've been in, the really good bands I've been in, have been the ones where the lead singer is calling the shots. Like he's DJing the whole night. He'll just turn around and go, Counting Crows, 3, 2, like we're in. Like he's able to read the room and make it happen. And I remember one gig in particular, we played, every time we play, there'd be some people dancing and it'd be fun. And then in between our sets, the DJ would go up and like thump, like Jamiroquai style, like super like thuddy, and everybody went up and started dancing. And we just realized that night, like we weren't going to win, like no point, right? So we all got back up on stage, and the lead singer turns back to me and goes, 4 on the floor the whole fucking night. Let's go. It doesn't matter what song it is, 4 on the floor. The moment the DJ faded out, all right, ladies and gentlemen, coming up next, we've got, and right as he did, I went, and he went in with like, I don't know, Mustang Sally or just some, but it didn't matter the song. I just did the pulse, I did the beat, and everybody danced the whole night. Everybody was up dancing, regardless of the song, because of the pulse and the beat and the tempo that I was playing the whole night. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The DJs have a major influence on energy and party for the night, and the bands that get it, and the bands that don't.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there you go. That's my
I think
story.
there's something scientific about that 4 on the floor rhythm. I think it just kind of very simply lives in our hearts, like we feel that's our pulse, right? So I think
Boots and Cats.
Boots Cats.
Something yeah, boots and cats, or only boots in if you're a techno producer.
There you go.
Oh,
No cats.
snap. Yep.
Fuck the cats.
Yeah, no, the cats will come later.
We don't need no
but
stinking cats.
I listen to trance, so it's a lot of boots and not a lot of cats.
Boots and cats and everything else.
Yeah.
But I think that lives inside of all of us, and it's very simply there. So when you hear those grooves and you hear that rhythm and all of the variations of it's right there. It's innate. We want to tap our foot. We want to get into that. I think an interesting production thing with dance music is if you can program a bass line or program a main or program whatever without your drum groove going, and it's funky, then you put that drum groove on there, you have unstoppable funk. Because that will be funky regardless. It will be funky regardless. So if you can do it without the element that is inherently going to be funky, you're set. You're done.
You've won.
And so when you approach melody or chord structure and any of that, because can you hear melody in your head? Like, can you imagine, there's a melody or do you approach it kind of from a rhythmic context first, and then maybe you're playing with sounds?
Yeah, I would say it's everything is rhythmic first. One very specific thing too is like, yes, those tracks that we kind of played earlier in the evening, there's melody there and guitars and layers of synthesizers and things like that. But typically in the techno music that I write, it's not very melody driven. Everything, if you pulled it back and you listen to what you want to call a melody of a track, you could play it on drums. You could, that's a drum line,
Yeah, cool.
It's a drum line with a shit ton of reverb and modulation all over it, but it's a drum.
Sure.
So
I think,
I think coming like from melody perspective, it's definitely like rhythms first, texture and tone second, and then actually the notation to me is not the most important thing.
Gotcha.
It's sonically more about the texture, I think.
I hear it. I hear it on specifically a lot of the groundwork submissions. But I'll talk about yours. Is that it typically like starts really good bass drum, really tuned bass drum. The bass drum's just creating the pulse, and then, like I said, I'm not joking. I listen to a lot of trance. Like I remember going through an Oakenfold phase, or digweed, so much digweed. But But and then you
yeah.
get these little sprinkles of things that kind of just show up from time to time over top of the pulse. You'll get like a hi-hat just kind of make its way in, or a synth kind of fade in. There's all these elements that over time grow and express themselves all over top of this foundation. Stop me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I really feel like that's, techno has that type of taking you for a ride and bringing things in and taking things out, and having, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's all under this foundational rhythm that tells you right at the beginning what the hell's going on, right?
I think there's nothing worse than just like skipping through a techno track, because you are not going to get what is organically happening with this hi-hat line for the last 3 minutes straight that has just build and gone up, and then all of a sudden maybe one quarter note of the last quarter note of the phrase of the kick drum is high passed, and then we're back in, and then all of a sudden there's this other world of things happening off of the basis of the previous 3.5 minutes. It's all about the long haul. It's why techno sets in like the length of them work out better in long formats, because the songs are typically longer. The evolution of phrasing, even though phrasing in techno music is typically shorter, the elongated nature of all the modulation and all the subtleties and things is way longer than everything. We're not talking about an 8-bar phrase or a, yes, there is techno that does that way, but if we're talking about the stuff that really resonates with me, it's these things that intertwine and polyrhythms and things that loop on a 7 and Euclidean rhythms and that kind of a thing. Euclidean rhythms are one of my favorite devices for melodies, for example.
Cool.
Having something loop on a 5, and then it matches up every so often, and then when it does match up on the downbeat,
every 4
everybody
bars
has this odd eureka moment, right? So
and that's a great tension builder too.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially when things are going over bar lines. Things are always fun when they're going over bar lines. One of my favorite things. So I couldn't agree with you more. The journey of electronic, but techno in particular. I couldn't do it with trance. Like, I can't drop the needle somewhere. I'm like, let's start at 4 minutes in, blink, and I'm like, oh, okay, and then I'm kind of playing it back in my head from what I remember the song. I'm like, okay, we're here, cool. And meanwhile, I should have just started it at the beginning and taken a pull and just relaxed on the couch, But
interesting aside, a Cliff Clavin moment.
Yeah. Nice.
It was so evidently when Freddie Mercury was hanging out in Germany, which is they figure that's when he got sick. Yeah. A lot of the clubs he was frequenting were underground clubs that was the beginnings of techno, and that they equate, or that Brian May has said that some of that did seep into their music, where Freddie was wanting them to try these loops, and I mean a lot of it hit the cutting room floor, but he said like there was something he was coming up with, and they're just like, what the hell is he listening to? But he was so engrossed by this music, apparently, like he said, he'd show up in the hotel sweating because he'd been dancing for like 6 hours, right? Yeah. But by then it was already entering his psyche, and he was trying to get Queen on board with it. Anyway, that's my Cliff Clavin moment.
I could only imagine how that could have gone,
right?
So incredible.
Underground German clubs in the 80s. Holy shit. Like,
spoiler alert, it didn't work out so well for him.
Well, no, sadly, no, but I just, I can't help but think what he was privy to, and what
correct musically, yes.
Unfortunately, because of the record company, that Queen didn't realize, or they didn't record because they were like, that's not what we're doing here.
No, they stayed in their lane though. They stayed in there's probably like there's something I want to say loyal about that, but there's something respectable about that, right?
Totally. Yeah. But it just, to me, it would just like that to me is just an interesting sort of like, that's one of those Star Wars stories where it's like, geez, if that album could have been made, what would have
Right.
happened? You know,
Alternate timeline. That would have been amazing.
Maybe.
Oh my God.
Anyway, there's a Cliff Clavin story, so
Take that
we'll
step
go
to the left.
there. You go.
That's pretty good. I kind of want to do a bit of a. We'll take a sidestep here as we do. I kind of want to do this a bit. I want to do a bit of a gear dive.
Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about what are you using right now, and maybe we're talking about drums. So what type of stuff are you using for your drum tracking that anybody could pick up and do, or not?
Like for programming wise, or are we
Yeah.
live drums? Or,
Oh no, programming drums. Programming.
I use Reason as my DAW, and I use Reason because the tab feature of the rack, spinning the rack around and routing, to me that just makes sense to me, and it always has, and I've been using it for a really long time. Everyone will always be like, oh, hey, what DAW should I start out using? When it's just whatever gets you writing music out of your head and out of the speakers the fastest. That's the one. That's the best DAW. You know. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So I like Reason, and in Reason you can create these things called combinators, and combinators are just these devices that combine. You can combine effects and racks and things together, and then route parameters to these macro knobs, basically, to control multiple things at once.
Cool.
I've created a number of combinators in a preset, like in presets that are like, oh, here's my drum sampler combinator, and it automatically has an LA2A in there just to kind of group things, and it's got like a reverb and all the stuff, so all I have to do is drop samples into it and I'm off to the races. And that kind of stuff, creating those combinators, and like for drums, and I have one for my external synthesizers that send MIDI out to the stuff behind me here, and I have stuff for another sampler that I like to use, and other things. Creating those shortcuts and mapping those out kind of goes along with my 5 a.m. program, my Hammer program. Where if you can do things to save workflow time, 5 a.m. doesn't suck as bad, and you can get way more done as you kind of go and do that. So set up templates and set up things, and if you're a Reason person, smash those combinators, put them together, make them, save them, do all that stuff. It'll save you so much time in the end when you open up a blank session and you just stare at it,
and you can just insert the whole plugin then by itself.
You just I literally open the combinator as if I'm opening up a VST, and boom, it's all there, and I can just drop samples in and off I go, and I'm ripping in a few minutes here. So that's
are you able to share combinators?
That's been useful.
Are you able to share them? Like,
yes,
is that something
to other Reason users?
You can export? Yeah,
for sure. If you have,
that'd be cool.
Like, for example, if there's third-party VSTs in it, then the other person obviously just needs to make sure they have those. But like, I've sent combinators to a friend of mine, and he's opened them up, and he's like, "Man, you just saved me this time in creating these." And I actually set one up as a sample chopper that has like a chunk trig kind of MPC style sample chopping monophonic nature about it. And I was struggling when I was making it, and I saw some tutorials, I saw a guy do it, and I kind of hacked it a bit, and I sent it over to my friend, and I shared it to him, and he was like, I would have not been able to do this. You've saved me so much time in doing this. And that's not the point of the convo, but the point of the convo is,
it's still cool though.
Get what gets you writing music the fastest. That's the best piece of equipment. That's the best drum synth. That's the best synthesizer. That's who cares of what it is? If you can make the sounds come out, make that happen. So but if we're talking reason, I like to use in that drum combinator, I have the Kong drum machine, which is like an MPC style drum machine, and I use that just because the sample parameters give like pitching things and reversing and layering samples on it is easy, nice characteristic. There's another one in there, the redrum, and it's more like a 909 style drum machine, 16-step phrase, 16-step sequencer there. And I like to use that on things with like a lot of interesting hi-hat programming, just because the knobs, I map the knobs out to my little Akai MIDI controller, and then I can real-time tweak those things. And I actually finished writing a couple acid techno songs in the last week, and one of the songs has a very in the forefront of the mix, a programmed hi-hat loop that I did real-time modifying and parameter playing. That kind of almost takes on this human-esque kind of a thing, as if someone's side-sticking a hi-hat, open hi-hat stuff. And it was just kind of an accent that we don't hear in techno music as much because of, quantization and everything, levels-wise being limited and that kind of a thing. So I don't know. I'm just, right now, post-album, I'm just doing a lot of exploring techno. I'm not even writing stuff that I would typically write, but it feels good, so why not do it?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you're in kind of a playground, especially with the software, that you can just play around. You can't really make a lot of mistakes, I guess, right?
Yeah.
There's no mistakes, only happy accidents.
Happy accidents.
Right answer. So drum programming in Reason, and Reason, if I remember correct, was free. Am I right? Was there a free version of it?
Not free,
no,
but cheap.
That was not. Yes, you're right. Yeah. No, you're right. I vaguely remember that back in the day there was a free version of it, but yes.
There was a free version of Rebirth, which was 2 303s, an 808, and a 909, and that was done by Propellerheads, who own Reason. They actually just changed their name to Reason Studios, I think, is what it was.
But 19, like 19 a month is pretty damn good for your hub. That's actually really good.
Oh, for their subscription-based thing, it's great. I have the full version. I got into it before they started the subscription-based version, but I have friends that have it and they say it's fantastic. So,
what is out of my own curiosity, what is your go-to plugin? The one that you Desert Island, for some weird reason, you only have that plugin and nothing else. Desert Island plugin.
The Desert Island only computer plugin you have.
It's on a USB stick, just that plugin.
It's a very long tethered USB cable as well to the computer on shore.
Desert Island plugin. Weird.
I found out of a happy little accident there. I found this one. It's a transistor emulation called Kazrog True Iron. And
how do you spell that?
You can Kazrog.
Found it. Yeah, I found it. We're good. True Iron. Here, I'll pull this up. Boom.
It instantly.
We can shop now, by the way.
Yeah. So I use it for example, for kick drums. I'll let a secret out of the bag here.
Go for it.
I like to tune my bass drums to the melody that doesn't exist. Tune my bass drums.
Yeah. Nice.
I will create a parallel channel and parallel compression, add that into taste, but create a kick drum bus with those two channels, and then throw this on there as well as an 1176. And depending on the characteristics of the kick drum, sometimes a Pultec And there is your goat bass drum.
That's
that thing's
your
awesome though. That true
iron.
True iron.
Snake oil, apparently.
Yeah.
Snake oil. This is your sound.
It works for me, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome, dude.
That is, that's a big part of the. Well, maybe some of the newer bass drum sounds for sure, but it adds a weight to the bass drums, and especially with techno music and just the nature of the bass drums being a little bit shorter and truncated to give yourself room for the sub bass to travel.
Yes.
Because you want, like, in my world, playing at the tempos that I play in, the phrases are only 2 steps long, typically.
Okay.
So, we're not dealing with a lot of actual time. So kick drum, the actual bass drum itself is not normally a long, with a long decay on it. It's very short. It's the sub bass and gluing that together with the kick drum in a bus that gives it that illusion that you have this monstrous kick drum with a ton of reverb and a ton of low end that normally those things don't really make sense putting them together, but it does.
Right.
And that's how I do it. So
we used to do it back in the day by actually routing in through the patch bay a sine wave generator to a certain frequency, and actually adding that to the bass drum. And you're right, it would create good decay, but it would actually give, as you say, heaviness to the tone as well, especially if you were putting it to a floor tom.
Yep.
Just put a sine wave, a gated sine wave to it. So yeah, well done. Oh, I like that. Well, I think we're going on almost 2.5 hours. I'm thinking we should wind her down here a tiny bit. Is that cool? Woo. We gotta wind her down. Yeah. Somebody's got to get to sleep here, because you guys have kids. Ha. Sorry, guys.
I'll be back here at 5 a.m. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Well, exactly, right? Jesus. What are you doing right? Yeah. What are you doing right now that you want to tell the people about that you got going on? Yeah.
Well, in terms of projects I'm working on, the album, my debut album, will be out later this year. Just kind of working on the final touches with a PR firm right now, and sourcing out the last 2 remixers for the follow-up remix EPs that are going to come out. And then again, that'll be about a month or 2 after the album drops. So it's going to be like one big chunk of goat music and reimagined goat music, probably in and around the summertime, I think. And then I'm working on a lot of music now. I took a little bit of a break after the album. I just kind of felt a little bit of an emotional dump, a workflow dump there, just where I would come to the studio and I didn't really feel like doing it was where my head was at. And that's a very real thing, So, but I feel like now I'm kind of at a time where there's no pressure. It's just having fun in here and writing and collecting music and doing that. And it was also one of the reasons why I wanted to pick up that MPC and essentially have all the time in the world to learn a new DAW that could be a pretty integral part in my next journey, which, we could talk about potentially performing this stuff live in some capacity or whatever that looks like. So, but the album is going to be coming out in the summertime. It's going to be finally out in the world.
Rad. And inspiring your kids every morning when they bring your espressos down. There you go.
Yeah, I hope so.
Exactly. Always what it is. We have a routine where I always ask the same question at the end of every stream, and I will ask you that question now. Are you ready? It is easy to put our heroes on a pedestal, but they seem more human when we see them fail. So can you tell us about something that's going on in your life, musically or unmusically, that you have not perfected, that you failed, and what you're going through to challenge yourself to perfect it?
We could talk about the rudiments that I completely suck at. Diddle diddles and all that. Let's go. We're on the drum channel. Let's do it.
Totally.
Honestly, that's a big thing that I failed at picking up, and I really have a passion to want to get a practice pad and take these 5 a.m. Time to get my chops, and put the time in. So. That's
I like that.
Being brutally honest on a drum channel here. You know what I mean?
No, it's perfect. That's the whole point. Not being good at rudiments, I think, is where we all sit, and we all got to work on it. And if you're feeling frustrations and if you're feeling failure while you're doing that, then you got to just pushing through, right? The challenge.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, let's wind her up here, bud. Man, it was super cool hanging with you today.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Oh man,
thanks for having me on. I really appreciate chatting with you guys. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you, man. I learned certainly a lot more about techno, but more about the electronic music industry in particular. And I think that's what we all kind of want to walk away with, is the interest of at least going down a rabbit hole. Anybody who's watching this now can at least go down a bit of a rabbit hole and want to be curious about what is all this electronic music about.
There's so many different places to go with it too.
Absolutely. Okay, dude. Sean, what do we got going on? Do we have anything scheduled for March?
Yeah, actually, we have nothing scheduled at the moment.
Yeah, because I'm moving. I'm in the midst of
you're
moving.
moving. You're going to be moving.
So
I
April,
didn't schedule anything.
That's exactly you. But we were talking about some stuff. But we ended with the goat for this month.
Yeah.
Which was
we'll
awesome.
probably have a couple things coming up in March.
That's better.
Just watch us on our socials there. It'll be a Drum Geek Vodcast. And then if that bores the hell out of you, you can also go to the website, drumgeek.com, where we have our vodcast channel sort of schedule and all that kind of good stuff. We are going to be trying to introduce a couple of new things we've got on the back burner and me and Paul have been talking about. So probably watching for a couple new co-hosts that we're going to bring into the fold pretty soon. And I think we've got a couple of round tables we're interested in doing with regard to like music law and some informational stuff that's kind of going to be really fun. And then, of course, there's always just spitballing things, but I mean, we'd love to have the goat back and any kind of a round table around even learning to program or learning to blah, blah, blah. And the goat can give us some of his tips and tricks. That would be great as well. So just keep watching our channel. And that'd be fun. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So so just watch the channels and watch our website, and we'll be up to some crazy stuff. What do you have on the go, Paul?
What do I have in the hopper? Oh, I'm in the middle of moving. Boxes literally everywhere, like around here. There's just boxes and buffoonery of having to.
And where will you be working?
In Kelowna?
Yeah,
I'll be working at Wentworth Music.
Wentworth Music in Kelowna. Are you kidding?
We have to do a plug. No, I'll be their sales manager there. I'm handling.
You're eventually going to be there, so.
Well, that's a good point. But I still do retrologists. I still do this buffoonery. I also mentor my a couple kids, but my niece in particular. We live stream together on Saturday nights. Nice. Always fun doing science and technology stuff.
Cool.
So there's always opportunity to do things. There you go. Awesome. I got nothing else.
All right.
Cool. Okay. Well, Goat, stick around. We're going to end her up here. Thanks, everybody.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh.